Okay, hey everybody, we're here this week with an AMA with Matan, specifically with our community team. The DAOstack community team has a number of questions that we've been wanting to ask on behalf of really our own interest, but also on behalf of what we've been hearing in the community. And we thought we'd just open a dialogue today with Matan Field, architect and CEO of DAOstack. So with that, we'll just make this kind of an open dialogue. And I'm wondering if Matan is no longer on the call. That's one thing I'm wondering. Does anybody see Matan? No? Okay. All right. Well, better that happens now than later. All right. I'll stop our recording. Oh, there he is.
Yeah. Sorry.
Okay, no problem. Okay, so with that, I'll just open it up. Maybe who would like to start? We'll just make it an open dialogue. Patrick?
Yeah, I'll go. So I have a couple of questions that I've just been accumulating from the community, and then I kind of have a few of my own. But I was hoping we could start maybe with a discussion of the archives. And maybe we could, I'm sort of confused as to the relationship between the archives and the Gen token. And, you know, I think you've briefly mentioned monetizing the archives at some point. So I was hoping you could maybe expand upon that and maybe how that would also affect partners and other people who build on the DAOstack.
Right, yeah, that's a really good question because, I mean, clearly, yeah, the archive is the least explained and also the least understood element in the DAOstack, just for one reason, because it's the only element that is not fully implemented, and that's clearly why there is, room for, for miscommunication. So, yeah, so let's briefly mention, what is the archives, what is their functionality, why they are needed, and then also how they are monetizable. So the archives are, by the way, just for reference, there is a very popular, I think perhaps the most popular topic today in the blockchain space is called token curated registries. If any of you heard this terminology. Mm-hmm. So TCR, token curated registries, very hot, very trendy. The archives is in a way our variation of TCRs, which I also argue are better. But we'll get there if you want to dive into it. So before saying token curated registry or reputation curated registry, let's just call them curated registries. Now, what are curated registries? So firstly, what are registries? Registries are simply databases. So if you want to reduce it to the simplest form, it's just lists. For example, let's make a list of good things and bad things. So the things can be anything. Let's say that it can be restaurants. So let's maintain a list of good restaurants versus bad restaurants which are not in the list. Okay? So these are curated lists. It can be the list of good organizations and lists that are not in the list. Organizations that are not in the list, which are bad organizations. Now, it can also be not binary. It doesn't have to be good versus bad. It can also be ranked. So let's rank all organizations in the space with respect to some metric, with respect to their effectivity, with respect to how well they contributed to the climate change, with respect to how professional they are in terms of blockchain technology, and so on and so forth. So you can make curation lists for any set of objects and any desired metric. Basically, that's curated list. Why it's important? I think it's quite obvious, because then if there is a curated list that a lot of people are trusting, then there's a lot of viewers to that list, which, by the way, brings you also to the way you can monetize it, because if there's a lot of viewers that trust that list, you can monetize the ability to register to that list, because if there's a lot of viewers, probably someone that has incentive to be registered there, and that registry would agree to pay for the registration, right? Who is he paying to? Like who is enjoying, who's benefiting from those payments? So one is the curators, clearly, if there is a curated registry, someone needs to curate it. Someone needs to create it is expecting returns, so you can benefit the curators. That's one way. And the second way is the token holders themselves. So someone needs to hold the tokens, and they're basically the economic driving engine of those curation lists. So this is like a very, very quick summary of what curated lists, curated registries are. I highly recommend on reading one of the core blog posts on this topic. I have one really good one. I need to find it, but yeah, if I find it, I will send it over, and otherwise I just recommend looking at it.
I know Simon has written a couple.
Simon basically invented this terminology, and he's like the guru of curated lists. He to be frank, he didn't invent the topic. The topic was known well before, but he invented the name of it, and he also popularized it. He wrote the first blog post that really marketed very well. He explained beautifully. He's also a very smart guy, and basically Simon was the guy in charge of popularizing that terminology. But then many people are followed up and came up with more and more models. Now, why it's called token curated registries? Because that is to say that tokens drive the economy of curated registries. Now, notice that there are different things that you can drive. You can drive the economy, and you can drive the governance system, the curation. Now, when people say token curated registries, they mean that tokens drive both. So the governance is what we call economic governance, as much as prediction market. Future key is an economic governance. Is a governance system that purely driven by economic forces. Plutocracy, so token-based voting, is economic governance. Okay, so token curated registries are registries that both economically and governmentally driven by tokens. Now, I don't want to open a Pandora box, but basically my general claim is that purely economic governance systems do not work properly for several reasons. But two reasons is that one, they are highly manipulable, just as markets are. Markets are very highly manipulable. It happens every day. And then the problem is that markets that are manipulable today, they are exploitable. Their economic values are exploitable, and they are exploited every day. The problem with economic governance is much more severe, because not only you're exploiting the economic power of it, you're also impacting the wrong decisions. So it's two different problems. And then there is a second problem of pure market economy, governance systems, which they don't cohere well. I argue that they don't cohere as good as meritocratic systems, but they are very scalable. And that's why we argue that holographic consensus actually merged these two qualities. So the market forces are in charge of scalability, but then the governance, the meritocratic forces are in charge of coherence and resilience. So this is the really quick, very summary of what curated registries are and what are token curated registries. Now, there are many different use cases for token curated registries. For example, one really neat example that someone gave in one of the blog posts was about curating the top universities. Curating the list of the top universities that if you study in them, you basically pay back your loans in 10 years. So that's a list. So the university that argues that they pay back their loans in 10 years. That's an example for curated list. Now, in our case, although the topic of curated list is very interesting generally, and I think there will be a lot of DAOs coming on top of the stack to do curated lists, we found the necessity for few very specific curated lists that support the DAOstack ecosystem. So there are special curated lists. Let's see which of them. For example, one, we argue that we have a framework with which you can build any governance system, right? And that framework, the building block of that framework is all sort of modules and plugins that you can bind together and you build governance protocols, right? Now, the whole power of it is that anyone can build, so I come to the stack, I want to build a new governance system, and I see the existing library of modules. So I try to play with them, and then I found out that I miss one module that doesn't exist there, which I think is super important for my organization. So great, since everything is open source, I can just write my own module. right? But then where is this list of modules that you can pick from, right? Now it's not just about, just where it sits, right? You can say, okay, it's in GitHub. But the question is like, who decides about which module is legit and which module is not legit? And what does it mean to be legit? Is it legit code-wise? Is it legit protocol-wise? And so on and so forth. So you need to have, for this kind of ecosystem, you need to have this kind of like list of modules that, that the professional network has kind of like stamped that is legit in some sense. And this is curated list. So one of those curated registries is the curated registries of governance modules. Another one, so right now when I open on Arc an organization, and maybe a sub-organization, a sub-organization, nobody can see that I deploy an organization on the blockchain. I mean, I just deploy a contract. Nobody can go over the blockchain and say, oh, these are organizations by DAOstack. It's a one big mess. So you do, and now let's say that so of course, when we run Alchemy, we keep that list of objects of organizations, we keep on our server. But there's now a problem. What if now Natalia is building her interface to the stack and she has a great application, but she doesn't know about the organization that I'm opening in my interface, right? So there is a need to have this kind of like collective shared database of organizations. Whenever you plug in new interface, you can instantly see the state of the world in terms of which organization exists and what are the relationships between them. And this is again a curation list, because it has to be curated, because if it's not curated, I can spam it, right? If it's open and anyone can register an organization, I would like to maybe harm that ecosystem, and I will just deploy thousands of wrong, false organization links. So there is a good reason to protect it. So again, protecting means curating. You have to create which organization. Now there is an interesting question with respect to which metric. So metric of what? Like good organizations, bad organizations, real, fake, who defines that? So you can have different forms of that curated registries that measure the goodness of organization in different metrics, different axes. So this is another curated list, which is curated list of organizations. And then we also noticed a third one, but again, you can go on, probably find more. A third one would be, for example, messages, asks, and like I have a need in our application, Alchemy, someone is asking for something, and then nobody's answering that something. But then if we had a database that all other applications can look at, they can look at it and give an answer. Maybe in their network effect, they have an answer to that question, which in our network effect we don't have an answer to. So this is kind of like marketplace for offers and asks. And then you can go on and on with that. And the bottom line to remember is that those are where they become important. They become important when you look at the ecosystemic point of view, because when you only look at one interface, you can keep all of that information on the server. So it comes in two dimensions. When you look at the ecosystemic point of view, when you want to have interoperability between different interfaces, and it comes when you talk about curation, because curation requires decisions and consensus. So you want to register something. So that's basically the two aspects of importance of curated registries, and specifically the archives, which are the specific use cases of curated registries that support specifically the DAOstack ecosystem. How clear, from 1 to 10, let's make a quick survey. How clear it is from 1 to 10 for each of you, please.
9.
8, 9.
7.
8.
9, 7. So 7. So I think, so I would be happy to hear another question from you, Pat, because you have the list, the lowest ranking.
I deemed you a point because you didn't necessarily answer the entire question. The last part of it was the relationship of the Gen token to these curated lists.
Sorry, I did not yet answer that question. Sorry, I just answered the first half of the question.
Okay.
I just have a quick question about what you said. When you talked about the Hive, you said offers and requests, and you equated that with questions and answers. I was surprised to hear that. I thought that offers and requests referred to like talent sharing. And so can you...
I meant, you're right. I meant questions in the sense of I need something.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, by the way, not hives. The archives is the collective name for all of them.
Yes.
And there are names for each of them, which actually it's a long story where they came from. So yeah, so to your question, Patrick, the relationship is very easy. I just say that they are monetizable. So I need to tell you two things: how it's monetizable and how it's related to Gen token. So the second question is very easy. The monetization is by the Gen token. Just for the special curated registries that support the ecosystem, their monetization is with the Gen token. And then what is their monetization? So for example, imagine that organizations, they have incentive to register themselves on that registry because then they are more visible to a larger network effect of interfaces, right? So imagine there is a fee. There is a fee to register your organization, maybe say $5 to register your organization on that registry. And then once you apply, the governance system decides if you are eligible to be registered or not. And if you're not eligible, you don't get back your money. You just paid it. So there are different forms of monetization of those registries. And since we haven't yet implemented, we have implemented the prototype many months ago, but we haven't implemented yet production ready a version of it. So I don't have one specific protocol for monetization that is the one we are going to use, but there are many. It's not hard to find a monetization protocol. It's actually hard to find the best one of them. So we will explore that. But the reason why we postponed that is because it's not. If you look at in the entire DAO stack, it's that one element that is not critical to do the first move. It's more critical for growth and interoperability and all that. So we allowed ourselves to postpone that element to the second version, the second release of the stack.
Cool, thank you.
Can we resurvey? Can we resurvey quickly? Or just Patrick? So how are you, Pat?
I would bring you up to an 8.5 or a 9.
Okay, great. I think 8. If everyone are 8 and above, we are fine.
So I imagine there might be questions related to that, and I have one. And Patrick, you and I have kind of talked about this as well. Like, Matan, is this related to how the Gen token will have utility in the case of curation networks that use the DAOstack as their engine?
Well, not exactly.
Yeah.
So let me explain. You can run any curation network. So let's run a curation network of restaurants on the DAOstack, right? Now the curation utility, the tokens that people pay for subscription, pay for registration, that token has that each list will have its own token. Okay. Mm-hmm. But then the question, how do you do the governance? How you do the decision-making process, to decide about whether to list or not registries and whether how to rank them. So that process, then you need to ask, okay, but what is your process? So when people today are speaking about token curated registry, as I mentioned before, they tie up those two things. They tie up the utility of the token and also the process, the decision-making process. So it's basically, that's why it's the token curated registries. The token are both for the utility and also for the decisions. So it's purely economic decisions. Yep. But once you're separating that, so still you're paying with token X to list on a curated registry X, then the decision-making process doesn't occur by the X token holders. It occurs by reputation holders of that list, or maybe a combination of them. And then the problem with meritocratic governance system is that they're not scalable as token governance system. By the way, also token governance system are not scalable and they are much more manipulable. So, and then you need holographic consensus. And that in order to facilitate holographic consensus, you need the network effect of predictors. And that network effect of predictors comes from the larger network effect of predictors of the DAO stack. And in order to involve them, you need to stake with Gen tokens. So you see, in a DAOstack curated registry, you actually have two tokens. One token for the utility, just as much as in any DAO, you have two tokens. You have the token of the DAO, and you have the token for the governance, which is the Gen token.
As well as a reputation currency.
As well as a reputation, correct.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so in that sense, it sounds like the utility of the Gen token for DAOs and curation networks, and really any organization that's building on the stack, is related to the holographic consensus.
Correct. Or more broadly, if you want, is related to the ability to produce large-scale decision-making process, large-scale and coherent or resilient decision-making process. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I argue that, I mean, I don't have a mathematical proof yet, but I argue that this is probably a universal nature, that there is no way to scale up coherent decision-making process without using some sort of like governance utility token, which effectively outsources the navigation of collective attention to a market-like network. Mm-hmm. If that makes sense to you.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Guys, does that make sense? Any follow-on questions to that? Go ahead, yep.
Yeah, so when it comes to use cases, one of the questions that sparks me, and it has to do with the utility of token, is that if I'm part of a 1,000 people organization, and in order to utilize Alchemy to organize our collective decision making, do we need to create a fund and purchase Gen tokens, or do we need to create a fund and deploy our own token?
The line broke for 2 seconds, so I heard 90% of it, and then I just missed 2 seconds. So you're asking, just to make sure, you're asking that when you are building a new network on top of the DAO stack, do you need your own token of the network? That's the question, or?
Yeah, and if I need my own token, is there a limited amount that should be the minimum of this fund in comparison to the size of the network, or there should be a minimum amount of tokens that should be generated also?
Okay, so let me try to see if I understand correctly the question and then try to answer, but please stop me. Like if I answer the wrong question, please stop me. So if I understand correctly the question, you're asking whether a new organization on the stack requires a new token, and what are the rules to know how many tokens maybe to print or to mint?
Yes.
So, okay, so let's start from the end. There is no meaning for the number of tokens in an organization. Generally, there is no meaning of number of tokens because, I mean, by itself, there is no, like, if we have 100 tokens or we have 1,000 tokens, there's just no meaning. We can just always divide a token by 10 and it's the same thing. So there is, by itself, there is no meaning to the number of tokens in circulation. It's absolutely meaningless. It only gets meaning once you have an additional reference that makes, that fixes the scale if you want. So for example, let's take an example. If we decided that we have some service, let's say the service is storage because it's easy to understand. And then if you want to storage something on that decentralized network, you need to pay 1 token per gigabyte. Now, once you fix that rate, 1 token per gigabyte, now there is a meaning whether you have 100 million tokens or 1,000 tokens. But as long as you haven't fixed the reference point for the scale, the number of tokens is just meaningless. So that's the first thing. Now, of course, once you did make such a reference, there is absolutely importance for your economy or your economic considerations, but there is no good formula for what is a good economy versus a bad economy. And there is no way to decide whether the Bitcoin formula is a good economy, is a good number, or maybe the parameters should have been different. I mean, probably they should have been different, but there's just no way to test it. I would argue that a good protocol is not a protocol that aims to make a good number. A good protocol is a protocol that aims to self-correct itself for the good number. You see what I'm saying? So you use market forces in order to self-improve its economy. I think that's the only way to actually get a good protocol. So that's in terms of the second question. In terms of the first question, so generally I would say yes. So a new organization requires a new token, but specifically I would say it depends on what is the functionality, what is the goal and mission of your organization. So for example, if the goal and mission of your organization is simply to allocate funds and nothing else, maybe you don't need a new token. Just collect 1,000 Ether and work with it as you go along. So you don't need the new tokens. But if in any stage, if you have a sense of ownership, you want people to be incentivized to be part of a network in terms of ownership, then you have to have a new token. That new token is basically the symbol for ownership in the network. So it can still hold for a case of funds. So let's say we are just managing now $1 million collectively, but we also want to incentivize people to place that fund to begin with. So we want to let them to be staked and basically initialize that fund and get tokens in return. So the tokens in that case, that simple case, the tokens stand for financial ownership of the collective assets. So generally it depends on what's your use case. I would say that the tokens in no matter what is your use case, if you do have an incentive to make people staked in, then you want to have tokens, and the tokens are just simple for how well they staked in. So that's a general answer. But if you want like a particular answer, we need to look at a particular use case. To what extent that answer? I'm not sure.
Yeah, it pretty much covers everything. Yeah.
Okay, please feel free to say that it's completely answering the different question. Like, please just.
For me, Matan almost covers it, but when I initially heard Eric's question, I imagined something related to, do the pools created, do the gen pools create, does the gen pool created, and does the token, the DAO specific token created, do those pools need to have a certain sort of monetary, a certain value in terms of dollars, or like is there a certain amount of wealth that actually needs to be placed into the system?
Okay, I'll try. Yeah, that's a good question. So, but it's actually two questions because you asked it both on Gen and both on the local tokens. So let's try to analyze them separately. So in terms of Gen, the Gen pool that a DAO is holding, think about it as the pool, the budget for governance. It's a governance budget, okay? The more gens you place on each and every proposal. So remember, the DAO itself places certain bounty, certain stake for each and every proposal that is going to pass in the DAO. That's really important. Without that, there is no incentivization for predictors to play the game. Without the predictors, there is no large-scale governance system ability. Okay, so it's really important that the DAO decides to stake some gens for each and every successful decision. And the beauty of it is that the DAO completely self-deciding how much of it. It can also decide to put zero. Just my argument that if they will put zero, they will not get large-scale governance. Mm-hmm. Okay, so the beauty of it is that the DAO can fine-tune that number of how many gen they put on each and every decision in terms of like some sort of like fraction of something. For example, fraction of it. You can remember there is a threshold for boosting, and then you can decide that the stake on each proposal is a fraction of the threshold. And now the fraction is just a number between 0 to 1. So each DAO can fine tune a number between 0 to 1, and you can think of it as that the more the number is higher, the higher the number is, the more basically inviting the DAO is for predictors. So when the DAO will raise its number up, all of the cloud of predictors will be pulled into that DAO because they want to work there because they get better compensation, right? But then since all of those clouds are pulling into that, all of the cloud is pulling to that DAO will scale up better than other DAOs. So when a DAO would like to raise that number, I'll tell you exactly when decision-making power is the bottleneck for their growth. So, there are a lot of companies that in fact, most companies or all companies in the regular world, their bottleneck for growth is not decision-making. The bottleneck for growth for small startups are capital, right? They lack capital. And then a second bottleneck is HR. They lack access to good talents. And then we actually see today, in the blockchain space, projects, they have roughly infinite amount of capital, an infinite amount of community members, or if you want HR, and their true bottleneck is actually the management capacity to deploy that capital into that HR. So whenever DAO runs into that wall, that its limiting factor to growth is actually decision-making, that's where the DAO would like to raise that number and attract more predictors, thus attract better decision-making capacity. And the beauty of it is that there will be now an arm race, right? Because if that is the limiting factor and now you just raise the number, so you place more budget on management, but then you become super more efficient, super more scalable, so that then you're more producing, then your token value will rise better and you'll have actually more capital to produce into management. But then other DAOs will need to compete with you because you just took all of the clouds of predictors into your DAO. So they would basically arm race for the benefit of predictors. So just opposite from the Bitcoin network, where the market economy works in terms of marginalization of work power against the miners, here the marginalization is towards the miner in a way. But that's great because it will drive all of those DAOs to grow faster and faster. So
with the miners, you're equating the miners with the predictors.
Correct.
Yep.
And yeah, so that's, I'm not sure anymore if you can tie that back to the original question, but that's,
I think that's good for now. Daniil, yeah.
Can I have a follow-up on that?
Yep.
Sure.
How does the network know them, or the network of predictors know what is this number, right? Would that be a use case for a token curated registry on itself, or how do you maybe?
So that's a great question. That's a great question. So part of the UX, which is not existing right now, it's like in the next version, but part of the UX is just that. So right now the UX is optimized for people who make proposals, but in the next stage you'll have different UX versions that optimize for different users. So if you are a staker, predictor, you will be able to look at UX in a way that allows you to browse between different DAOs and optimize with respect to that. Like look for DAOs that pay better, if you want. All right?
Maybe you cut when I asked the second part, but would that be
so soon in the next UX, predictors will be able to browse between different DAOs and look for those DAOs who pay better. I mean, you can already do that now in principle by looking at the blockchain, of course, but if you understand what to look at. But it will actually be part of the UX in the next upcoming version.
So maybe we'll see if there's any other. It seems like we've covered a lot of territory in a certain area. Anything completely different?
I could float a community question.
Yeah.
This has been popping up in our Telegram a lot, Matan. But some community members, they are a little concerned that the Genesis DAO has the option to mint 40 million Genesis tokens. They think that this inflation will diminish the value of the Genesis token. And I was wondering if you could give a comprehensive response to that. You know, why is this ability needed, and will this actually diminish the value as expected?
Well, so the short answer, no, it won't, if well managed. Okay, that's the short. No, if it will be well managed. Why? Because the idea is that you should mint tokens for things and activities that produce more value to the ecosystem than the value that you are diluting, right? So if I'm doing an action, whatever I do, I produce code, and that code has certain abstract value to the greater ecosystem, right? And that abstract value to the greater ecosystem can be translatable to the rise of the value of the Gen token, right? Maybe because I produced a great code. Maybe I did business development. Maybe I made a partnership with the Ethereum Foundation, okay? Whatever I did, it has some abstract value. That abstract value can be translated in principle, of course, not in real measurement, can be translated into rise of the value of the Gen token. So by definition, my action has contributed value to each stakeholder in the each Gen holder in the ecosystem. So that's driving the value up. Now, when you print tokens and compensate me, of course, you are incentivizing me to do more, but then you're bringing the value of each Gen token holder down. Now, if you're printing value less or equal to the amount of value that I'm producing, then you're not diluting, you're actually just doing the opposite. So, and of course, now the question is how you do it right. Like, how do you produce the right number of tokens to the right activities? And that's what all decentralized governance system is about. A good decentralized governance system is such that it makes decisions to invest, whether it's funds, Ether, hard funds like Ether, or soft funds like your own token. But a good governance system is a governance system that invests its own capital in activities that produce more value than the value that you're investing at, right? That's by definition a good governance system. And there is no magic answer to how to produce that governance system, but evolution, because different DAOs will have different protocols, and more so they will also have different reputation distributions, so different initial conditions for those protocols. So they will evolve differently. And good governance systems will perform better and outperform the bad governance systems. So by economic evolution, you'll just get better and better governance systems. So you see here, for example, that the importance is about the initial condition. You have to start with sensible protocols to begin with and sensible reputation distribution to begin with. But more importantly, or not less importantly, you need to have a good evolution track. So you need to easily be able to upgrade your protocols, but also you need to easily scale up your operations such that the good ones will outperform and survive and the bad ones will decay. And that's exactly why we built the DAOstack in the way we did, to allow for that economic evolution to rapidly take path. So that's part of it. Can you re-ask the question just to tie me up back to the question?
The primary concern was
right.
These tokens inflating the supply and driving the value down. Right,
correct. So so bottom line, you can compare it. So from a different aspect, you can compare it. With mining, right? You could have asked the same question about any project that has sort of mining. So Ethereum, for example, Ethereum produced such and such tokens upon Genesis, right? And then they just choose the random parameter, 26%. So 26% of the token printed upon crowd sale were committed to be printed each and every year for further miners, right? 26%. Why? I don't know. Nobody knows. Okay? Whether that's the right number, there is no way to, it's probably not the right, there is no right number. It's definitely not, the optimized number. Now they also, by the way, they also kept the freedom to change that strategy. Actually, Ethereum is very special in that it doesn't have a limit on like final cap on the number of tokens at infinity as, for example, Bitcoin has. They never did that commitment. Actually, in the preset, they left the freedom to change that protocol at any time. By the way, just a couple of weeks ago, Vitalik made a suggestion to actually finally cap the number of tokens that will ever be printed in the Ethereum network, and he suggested to make it twice of the initial distribution. By the way, he also made that comment in April 1st, and it's really amusing because he basically he did not reveal if it's a joke or not, and it's a really nice trick of him because in a way he's not committing whether it's a joke or not, but he's testing the ground because by seeing how people react to that, he can see if it's actually a serious proposition that people will actually swallow. It's a really sophisticated trick.
That's great. We should actually just implement that as a governance module. Is that all proposals need to be made on April 1st?
Yeah, on really straight, like really sensitive proposals. Yes. So the answer is that definitely. I mean, mining is not only it's not important. Not only it's not diluting. It's important. Like let me give you an example. Actually, that's example by Fred Ersan, the founder of Coinbase. They wrote in his blog post. So imagine that Ethereum today had the ability that DAOstack provides, which is to print more tokens for contributors of value, right? So would you agree that solving the scalability problem of Ethereum worth at least 10% will lead to rise of 10% of the token value? Would you agree with that? Mm-hmm. Okay, answer yes. I mean, if you don't agree, you need to check something, because you should agree that it will probably lead to 10x rise of token value, probably. So like 1,000%. But definitely, 10%. I was very, very conservative. Not even 100%. 10% of the token value, right? And probably 100% and probably actually 1,000%. So even if you take 10% is just the daily fluctuation, so it's completely negligible. But just 10%, consistent rise of 10%, worth how much? $4 billion, right? Right now, as we speak. So $4 billion is the bounty that Ethereum could have offered to people to solve the scalability problem, which is quite a lot, right? Some people would work on the scalability problem for $4 billion. It's a nice bounty. If you just had also the capacity to manage that bounty and source it to the right places, and which is exactly what we are suggesting. So, I mean, if you put aside the way to do it, which is what we're offering, but even just the ability, and just for a moment, imagine that the Ethereum Foundation just ran out of Ether, which is not the case right now, but let's assume so. In that scenario, the Ethereum Foundation will be stuck. I mean, they clearly have the incentive to print more tokens, and by that solve significant problems, but they don't have the ability to do so, so that they're stuck, right? So being able to print more tokens, and by that incentivizing the network for growth and problem solving, is a great, great tool. It's not a delusion, it's actually an opportunity. Now, of course, that needs to be well managed. I mean, of course, if we use it wrongly, then this will not be the case. So the way that we think about it is that we want to gradually, and that, by the way, that's the same question is true for not only about the minting of new tokens, but also the management of Ether funds, right? We raise $30 million, 10 goes to the company, to the nonprofit company for further development of 4 years. And then another, whatever left from that goes to a fund, an incubator fund that supports projects that goes on the ecosystem. So now we still need to make sure that management works well. So our strategy is to firstly hold that ability within the nonprofit company. So both the ability to manage the funds and the ability to mint tokens, but then gradually through experimentation, through the economic evolution that I just mentioned, gradually shift that ability to the DAO, to the Genesis DAO that will be launched on top of the DAOstack. So that's the answers for the responsibility of making that process correct.
I think a good follow-up there, which is also related to some of the things that people have been asking, is how will reputation be initially distributed in the Genesis DAO?
That's a really important question, which we haven't finalized the answer for, but we do have several approaches that we are building up. So you would like to basically mix two strategies. Like one strategy is to say, you know what, let's be very conservative. Let's allocate reputation to a small number of professional people that we trust, that we believe will be a good initial condition. That's, I would call it responsible, but that's not scalable, right? You're not involving large number of people and also diversity. I mean, the other side of that is, okay, let's distribute all power evenly to all Ether holders. Of course, that's very risky, right? I mean, that's pretty large diversity, but it's pretty risky. So we are trying to hybrid and mix those two strategies. So let's say, just an example, this is not a commitment, but just an example, let's say that 30% of reputation was allocated by the company. Not necessarily to the company, but by the company. So maybe to the company, and maybe to, not the company, the individuals of the company, maybe to professionals, the top professionals, a few top professionals in the Ethereum ecosystem, maybe a few top VCs, maybe to some of our top stakeholders, et cetera, et cetera. And let's say that then the rest of 70% you distributed, but again, you can make better or smarter or less smart distribution mechanism. For example, distributing reputation as an airdrop for all Ether holders is definitely scalable, but pretty non-smart strategy. Let's show another smarter strategy. Let's do it, which we actually we've already been doing. Let's do a ground drop. So every time we go to a conference of Ethereum and meet, the top Ethereum developers and thinkers in the space, let's ground drop them some amount of reputation that they can later redeem and act from. That's a more selective. I mean, it's in between the scalability and smarter, right? It's a more selective process to scale up reputation distribution, and we've already done that in a few conferences, in 3 conferences. Another one would be, and we are going to do it. Let's airdrop within, let's say, a Twitter campaign. We make a Twitter announcement of Alchemy. Whoever reply with an address gets some level of reputation. But let's do it wisely, because in order to get that reputation, you need to actually launch the Alchemy on your browsers and do some activities. So we just filters those who are more interested in the project. It's another filter for people who are more engaged, more interested, more aware, perhaps. So you see, there are several approaches between wide airdrops, partly wide ground drops, and centralized decision-making distribution. And we want to mix those strategies in order to kind of balance between scalability and accuracy to begin with, and then gradually, of course, distribute more and more over time. You're probably muted, Josh.
Anything else?
I do have a question, which is I think, well, yeah. I'm very curious, Matan. How does your background help you think about DAOstack, and how does your background help you in this project?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I mean, I guess in several ways, depending which background you refer to. So, I mean, on one hand, my professional background was, I would say, very strong analytical background, but I would say in a way that relate with system thinking or problem solving. So my research in string theory was, about solving big problems, structural problems, kind of, I would say, that requires the kind of like, both the ability to zoom in and think analytically, but also to zoom out and see the bigger picture. So I think, and that's, by the way, I mean, it's quite known that a lot of string theorists, when they complete the PhD, they transition to completely different domains. I know I have friends that completed PhD and moved to biology, friends that moved to economy, and other branches, or just the industry. And all of them were very successful in those branches because they just acquired the tools for large scale, like kind of like wide system thinking combined with strong analytical background. So I think that's one thing probably. Secondly, I had a really strong passion for cooperative structures for about 20 years. So starting when I was 18, now I'm 39. I will be 39 probably with the same week of the opening of the public sale. So when I was 18, I was really passionate about cooperative structures. So how would companies would perform better under more cooperative structures that align interests better. That's also what drove me to found the food cooperative when I was 20 something, 5 maybe. More from the desire to experiment, how cooperation works or doesn't work. My experience was more, although the experiment was successful at the social level, for me it felt as a failure because the outcome was that cooperation is super hard. And I think one reason for that is that, social direct cooperation, I think, is hard and is not scalable. And when I discovered the blockchain, I mean, thereafter I continued for research, and during the postdoc, I had this idea for social ride sharing. That was like my third project. I did this food cooperative, and then I did a communal garden, which was also very good success. And then the third project was about social ride sharing. That was actually the first technological project. And then, I mean, it was clear that we need to have cooperative structure at scale, which I was always interested at, but I didn't know how to make it work. And then someone told me to look at the blockchain, and that was the same month where Vitalik published his white paper. And then immediately I said, okay, that was the missing element. I mean, we needed a technology that can coordinate people at a large scale programmatically, and not directly, not socially, but actually asocially or indirectly or programmatically. And that's exactly what blockchain does. And then of course, I mean, from there I realized that, you know, the missing element from there is basically the rules for programmatic cooperation at scale. So I understood the problem, you know, about 4.5 years ago, but it took me like 4 years to actually resolve the solution for that, which only crystallized. I mean, I say crystallized not to say that the protocol is completed or will not go under revision. It will go under many revisions, but crystallized in the sense that I actually feel that we have a full picture of how cooperation scale works, and which we call holographic consensus, and that crystallization just took place, you know, finalized, I would say, the crystallization finalized only towards the end of 2017, beginning of 2018. So just, you know, 3-4 months ago. Yeah. So yeah, background. Yeah, I think roughly. I hope.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah.
I mean, I was also very passionate about, you know, not climate, but more generally, ecological footprints and ecological problems. I was more active on that when I was younger. And at some point, I just concluded that trying to fight with the system from from at small scale is kind of like Don Quixote. It's like fighting with windmills, because the economic forces that drive the failure are so strong that you can just fight with them forever. They're just so much stronger than you. So at some point I just realized that the only way to actually correct ecological problems at scale will be to actually reinvent the way that economic works at scale, and just to replace existing system, and not by breaking them, but inventing new systems that are just much more effective at scale. And I think that's, I mean, to be frank on that, I think that cooperation at scale is the only chance for humanity to survive the next 2 decades. That's roughly what my prediction.
I was hoping we would actually talk about that. Maybe Matan, you could even say a little bit more about this. Like, what is the larger vision of DAOstack, or of yourself as it pertains to DAOstack, in terms of the collaborative economy, the mesh of interoperable DAOs, the internet of work? Maybe say a few things about this.
Yeah. So right. I mean, by the way, I just want to airdrop a name. I mean, if you want to hear more about that and really understand that topic, you should listen to actually 2 names. You should listen to Jordan Greenhall, and you should listen to Daniel Schmachtenberg. These are the 2 gurus of this topic. I think 2 of the greatest thinkers of our time, and definitely the gurus of this specific topic.
And we have an interview. We have an interview with Jordan specifically about DAOstack on our YouTube, and I would love to get one with Daniel as well. Yeah, Daniel. I don't know if you all know, but Daniel is also an official advisor of us. They are both incredible. You should speak with them. So I think in terms of vision, I mean, if we take a pitch of Daniel's speech for a moment, then it's basically just what I said. Humanity has no chance to survive the next 2 decades in the current model. The reason is because we gain exponentially. We exponentially increase our powers, in particular destruction powers, but we're not at the same time exponentially increasing our sense making and decision making. So right now, for example, we can self-destruct very easily, but we cannot make sense very easily. So for example, and why can we make sense easily? Because the game theoretic incentive at the global scale are broken. So for example, if I'm the owner of the largest oil industry player, I have hundreds of billions of dollars, right? I have all the capital I want, and I have a personal direct incentive to misinform everyone about the danger of fossil fuels and about the solution of
forgot the word, energy, alternative energy,
Mm-hmm.
right? Reusable? No,
Yes.
forgot the word. So
Renewable.
Renewable, thank you. Renewable energy. So you see, I have a direct incentive to break the game at a global scale. Now, more than just being evil, let's say, you say, but people are not that evil, they don't want to break the planet. Yeah, but what if I actually, convince myself that I will not break the planet? I convince myself that the planet is unbreakable. And this is a well-known phenomenon. If you want another guru in a different topic, my guru on behavioral economics is Dan Ariely. If you haven't listened to his talks, go fast and listen to a couple of his talks. He's one of the best speakers I've ever seen. And he's explaining behavioral economics better than anyone else I've ever met. And he has a lot of talks on YouTube. So Dan Ariely shows, like, live experiments. He shows how we are all biased by our incentives, completely. None of us is free from that. Even you can think of, if people have money, they will not be biased by $1 incentives. Wrong. It's proven by experiments. People that have money are completely biased by $1 incentives. So we are all biased. So what would make you think that if I'm an owner of a giant industry and I can make billions of dollars profit, I will not bias my thinking about what is right and what is wrong? So the very fact that a few of us run the decision-making at scale is it's destined to fail. It's time to make the wrong decision-making. And the only way out of that is if all of us, and many people at the same time, could be cooperating and generating even more powerful economic structures that spread decision-making on a larger collective intelligence, and also that built in aligns the interest of the individual with that interest of the collective, which is right now not the case, right? So that argument by itself suggests that if we are not correcting the ability to cooperate better and align interests of the individuals with the collective, we will simply not survive the next, sometime, but then some experts such as Jordan and Daniel would argue that this time frame is much, much shorter than everyone thinks. And I was very generous, by the way. When I said 2 decades, I was very generous. You should speak with those gentlemen to get a more clear number. So, and we kind of like see that. Like, I don't want to take specific example, but for example, if you take the US, I don't want to drill into a specific example. If you just look at the US right now, I think that kind of process where wrong sense making is kind of like enforced on society due to wrong concentration of power, I think it's completely it's completely obvious.
It's evident.
Yeah. So that's the argument. Now the vision that we have is that is to create that mechanism for a large number of people to coordinate well, easily, and by that better align interests of individuals and the collective, and by that create what we call anti-rival economy. Which, by the way, the one reason I really like the name ARC. So I like the name ARC for 2 reasons. So 3 reasons. Originally, someone suggested us using ARC for a completely different reason that is coming from alchemy. So ARC is a word that is related to alchemical plane, if you want, or alchemical domain. But then I really liked ARC because ARC, A-R-C-H, is the name for a form of governance in Latin or Greece. In fact, all monarchy, hierarchy, plutarchy, it's all derived from ARC. So ARC is a method of governance, which is just perfect for what ARC does. But the third reason why ARC is so cool is because ARC is also acronym for anti-rival economy. So anti-rival cooperation, which is exactly what we're producing at scale. So anti-rival economy it's a whole new economy that people are not discussing not for a reason we understand, but we should start speaking about it as soon as possible. The thing is that today, the entire economic paradigm is only relying on rival products. Rival products, definition for rival products is products that if I consume, you have less of it. So if I have an apple and I eat it, it means that you cannot eat it. If I drink that bottle of water or something else, or orange juice, you will not drink that bottle of orange juice, right? They are consumable. So these are rival products. And in fact, the way that our economy is built is only considering rival products. and it's only in a way benefiting the production of, or incentivizing the production of rival products. But what about anti-rival products? So what are anti-rival products? Anti-rival products are products that not only they are not becoming less valuable when I share them to me. So if I share my juice, I have less value of juice in my hands, right? So anti-rival products are not only they don't become less valuable when I share them, they actually become more valuable when I share them. For example, information, code, knowledge, etc. Right? It actually become more valuable when people are looking at my open source code, right? So this is kind of like now in the old days we didn't have much of anti-rival products, but you can see that the production and the need of anti-rival products correlates with the pace of innovation. And in a zero-pace innovation society, that's one of the blog posts I'm right now writing. But in a zero-pace innovation society, there is no need for anti-rival production, and also there is the Nash equilibrium game theoretical. Well, the game theoretical Nash equilibrium is of closed source culture, and you can look at it and see that in an infinite-pace innovation society, there is a need for anti-rival products, and there is a game theoretic Nash equilibrium of open source society. So we are actually transitioning from one to the other, and that goes together with transitioning from a rival economy into anti-rival economy, or at least a combination of them both. And I think as long as we don't account for that anti-rival economy, we're not producing anti-rival products, we're not producing anti-rival collaboration. And as more as we are inventing new models that account for anti-rival products, we do produce anti-rival collaboration. And that's exactly what DAOstack is about at the largest vision, a larger scale vision, which is to produce an anti-rival economy that incentivizes individuals and generally agents to produce anti-rival products that by definition benefit the collective and not just the interests of the individual. And by that, aligning the interests of the individual and the collective. So that's I'm trying to throw in a lot of different things into one partly coherent picture. So I hope something of it makes sense.
Yeah, super good.
So on this survey, 5 will be good. So if I do this survey, 5 will be good.
The bar is lower the more abstract the concept.
Yeah.
No, it made a lot of sense to me. I saw Roberto come in. I imagine it means you need to go, and this has been really useful. How are we doing?
Yeah, I mean, it was not Roberto, but yeah, all the rest is true. Yeah.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah, I think it's a good time to call it a day.
Okay, that worked for everybody. Good.
Yeah, I'm happy to do more of it if there is a desire or need, or I think it's super beneficial. I mean, I'm also happy if you want to publish that. I think I don't see why not, but you decide.
Okay, yeah, we will, I think. Okay, guys, anything else for now? We're good. Thank you to Matan very much. Yeah, great.
Also my opportunity to really, really thank you. I think we have one of the most incredible teams in general, in particular around the community. So just the opportunity to thank you.
Thank you. Nice. Yeah. Okay. All right. We'll be in touch.